In the summer of 1943, a crucial battle took place during World War II that hardly anyone has ever heard about. But this battle in the Pacific Theater became a pivotal victory for America against the enemy Japanese. It took place on the small island of Rendova, located in the Solomon Islands, within the New Georgia Island Group. It was occupied by enemy Japanese and was being used as a forward base for protecting nearby Munda Airfield. The United States, under the command of Admiral William F. Halsey and Admiral Richmond Kelly Turner, launched a surprise attack on the island in order to neutralize the threat at Munda Airfield. Beginning on June 30, 1943, American forces landed on the beaches of Rendova and encountered resistance from Japanese snipers. But this battle was very unique. It was the first invasion of the Pacific Theater in which the Allies utilized small little landing craft called LCIs to land troops. The initials LCI stand for Landing Craft Infantry, and LCIs have an incredible yet mostly unknown history. But that history began at Rendova, New Georgia. It was the LCI's big debut in the war. These brand new little ships would become one of the most important factors in winning World War II. And there was one thing that made Rendova such an attractive target to the Allies. On the northern end of the island, there was a 3,400-foot mountain that made for an excellent observation post. If they could capture it from the Japanese, Americans could use it to provide artillery support against the enemy across the channel at Munda Airfield. The Allies needed to take Rendova at all costs. On July 4, 1943, a few days after the initial landings, LCI Flotilla 5 landed additional troops of the U.S. Army's 169th Battalion on Rendova's northern beaches. But suddenly the Allies were attacked from 16 Japanese bombers. And these bomber planes, known as Bettys and Sallys, dropped bombs directly on top of where the LCIs of Flotilla 5 were unloading troops.
We had troops on my ship on that time. That was 329.
We pulled in there, it was on July the 4th, 1943 when we pulled in there, and it was a real big harbor. And right over here on this side of it was this big mountain. So we unloaded the Seabees, and as we pulled out, Grandpa had real good ears. I could hear a Jap airplane right away.
On the LCI 329, Stephen Gansberger and his buddy, Elmo Pucci, shot down a Japanese bomber.
So anyway, I looked up like that, and I was shooting with a gun at that time. It was on a 20 millimeter. And boy, here they come, 16 of their big bombers. And you could see it, boom, 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 boom. And that's all Grandpa did was my gunner loaded, and I just aim my head like this, and I just pull. And I just keep pulling.
I told that guy Pucci, I said, keep pumping, babe, until the barrel gets out.
Out of the 16 of them, we shot 14 of them down.
The young American boys aboard the LCIs fought back valiantly in their first action of the war.
They looked like Bettys according to our recognition charts. And the next thing, they were over us, and all the guns were firing, and we shot down one. What happened is they passed us, proceeded south and turned around and came back north. They flew over us. One was shot down. I was watching that, and the others were proceeding north back to Rabaul or wherever they came from.
The LCIs shot down several of the bombers themselves, but tragically, a bomb dropped between the USS LCI L-65 and the USS LCI L-24. 3 LCI sailors were killed that day: Ernest Wilson and May Lynn Paulson of the LCI-24 and Hurley Christian of the LCI-65. Lou Plant was there that day on board LCI-24 and lost his buddy, the radio man, May Lynn Paulson, when a piece of shrapnel struck him through the head.
65 and the 24 at Rendova were not gunboats, they were just troop carriers. Well, you'll notice the 24 and the 65 are leaning toward each other. Both of them had a hole blown in the side.
Below deck on the LCI-24, some of the Army troops also lost their lives after being struck by shrapnel that went through the side of the ship's steel hull.
I do remember several of them ran below, and they were killed down below. These guys are down in the troop compartment. They should have gone ashore and dug a foxhole or something.
As the rest of the LCIs in Flotilla 5 left Rendova Harbor to pick up more troops for another landing, Lou Plant stayed at Rendova to bury his friend on the island.
Wilson, he was older than the rest of the crew. He was probably 35, something like that, and he had volunteered. He was from down east someplace. Wilson was a very close-mouthed person, and he looked at us with skepticism, like he was dealing with a bunch of kids or something. You know, he had a dry wit and stayed pretty much to himself.
Lou Plant remembered his friend May Lynn Paulson, who he had to bury on Rendova that July 4th.
We were both in the communications, so, you know, we had something in common there with the codes and things like that. So the only thing that happened was a chaplain, I guess, came and wanted to know. We were sure he was dead, and he had the top of his head blown off, so he was really dead. Yeah, you could smell of death there. You know, when we went ashore, you could smell, like I say, the smell of death from the previous burials there.
After several days of intense fighting, the United States was able to secure the island and drive out the remaining Japanese forces, thanks to the new LCI. This was a major victory for the Allies, as it allowed them to establish another base of operations in the Solomon Islands and begin pushing towards their ultimate goal of Japan. And it proved LCIs could do the job. For more information on the incredible history of the LCIs in World War II, check out my new book, When the Beaches Trembled, available online at Amazon and Barnes & Noble.